Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are wrestling with, well, a huge stack of source material dedicated to one of the most personal, challenging, and pervasive issues facing modern society, addiction. We're diving deep into understanding the modern landscape of addiction, not just to substances, but to behaviors as well. And our mission here is to pull out the most vital, the most unbiased facts about personalized risk, the profit incentives, and, what's actually working right now in recovery.
Our mission today is, I think, really crucial for you, the listener, because the environment we live in has been, well, it's been correctly termed, an ocean of addiction, for-profit marketing, and confusing health information.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and we need to move past the moral judgments, all the noise, and really understand the underlying neuroscience, the genetic levers, and critically, the practical tools that are out there for genuine, lasting recovery.
And the material we had for this deep dive is incredibly broad. We're covering everything from the risks with modern alcohol and high-potency cannabis to the shocking scale of industry targeting.
And even some surprising things.
Yeah, the surprising potential of cutting-edge pharmaceuticals like GLP-1 agonists and why simple, community-based 12-step programs continue to be profoundly and scientifically effective. Okay, let's unpack this right away. Where do we start? I think we have to start with how experts actually define this thing.
We have to. It's so necessary to move past the casual use of the word. We hear people say they're addicted to a TV show or coffee.
Right, I'm guilty of that.
We all are, but that's just not the clinical reality. Addiction is defined by the persistence of doing something harmful.
Harmful to the point of destruction.
To the point of destruction, despite knowing the consequences and despite wanting to stop.
And that leads us to that classic and maybe a little disturbing scientific example.
The 1950s rat study.
Exactly, the rat study.
That's the perfect illustration of the core mechanism. Researchers, they gave rats a chance to stimulate their own pleasure centers in the brain electrically.
And what happened was they just kept choosing that stimulation.
They kept choosing it. They would ignore the water, they would ignore the food pellets right next to them, and they would just starve themselves until they died.
Wow.
Addiction is, at its core, about choosing that powerful, immediate, artificial reward over the natural, life-sustaining behaviors.
That pattern of choice leads right into the definition that really stuck with me from the sources. Addiction is a progressive narrowing of the things that bring one pleasure. It's not one big catastrophic event.
No, it's an erosion. That's a great word for it. You see natural, life-affirming rewards, stable relationships with family, friends, meaningful work, even just having a home, they start to fall away.
Sacrificed one by one.
Exactly, one by one, for the substance or the behavior. And eventually, the person becomes not only physically dependent, but psychologically dependent because the addiction is often the only thing left.
The only thing that reliably gives them a reward.
The only thing. And that makes it painfully clear why they hang on to it, even when it's destroying them.
So let's tackle the born addicted myth. I hear that all the time. How much of this is really driven by our genes?
Okay, so there is a big genetic component to the risk, but we have to be really clear with the science. A baby born to a substance-using mother can be physically dependent, yes. They can go through withdrawal.
But they're not addicted.
They are not addicted. There's no conscious behavior, no seeking the drug for its effect. It's purely physical dependence.
But the predisposition, that genetic bias for developing what we now call a use disorder, that's pretty substantial. The sources put heritability estimates at what, between 0.3 and 0.5?
Which is a huge range. It means 30 to 50% of the variance in addiction risks across the population comes down to genes. And what's fascinating is how individual the response to substances can be, even with that.
Right.
There's this work by psychiatrist Mark Chuckett. He studied the sons of alcoholic fathers and found this distinct physiological trait. About 8 to 10% of people experience alcohol as less punishing.
Less punishing. What does that mean in practice?
It means they feel less body sway, fewer of those subjective negative feelings, and fewer hangovers.
So they don't get the crucial negative feedback that keeps the rest of us in check.
Precisely. If the substance doesn't make you feel terrible in the short term, you are just significantly more susceptible to heavy, risky use. You're missing those critical biological breaks.
So if you happen to be one of those people, you're just genetically wired to be at greater risk. The simple, critical takeaway for everyone listening then is, the only way to be sure a substance won't damage your life is to just never use it.
That's the most protective advice possible, yeah.
Before we move on, we should just clarify one last piece of language.
Yeah.
The difference between addiction and use disorder.
Right. Use disorder is the term we use now in the diagnostic manuals, and it represents a much broader spectrum. It can be mild, moderate, or severe.
And was introduced for a reason. Right.
Yes, to facilitate earlier intervention, especially in primary care. The goal is to catch someone who is, say, drinking a bit too much on weekends but still has a job, and advise them to cut back before it progresses. Addiction is really reserved for the severe end of that problem.
The destruction of life and relationships we were talking about.
Exactly.
Okay, that framework helps. Let's connect this to the bigger picture. The incredible financial incentives. We have to talk about the addiction for profit model.
We must. We have entire industries, alcohol, social media, nicotine, opioids, whose financial models rely directly on a large percentage of their users developing dependence or addiction.
And the alcohol industry statistic it was just jaw-dropping.
It is. 10% of the U.S. population consumes about half of all the alcohol sold.
Wait, say that again. 10% of people
Drink about half of the total volume. These companies are not profiting from people who have one glass of wine on a Friday. They are entirely dependent on heavy, daily, often disordered drinkers.
And that incentivizes them to engineer social norms to increase consumption, even for those who are at a higher risk.
Absolutely. We saw a long, deliberate campaign by the alcohol industry, starting in the late 90s, to increase women's drinking. They targeted social trends, media narratives, what we all now know as mommy wine culture.
And that's particularly exploitative.
It is, because the damage per standard drink is generally more severe for women than men. It's partly body size, but also hormonal factors that change how alcohol is metabolized. They actively normalized a pattern of drinking that's physically riskier for that specific group.
So how does this industry mesh with the constant flip-flopping we see in the media about alcohol's supposed health benefits? The headline that a glass of red wine is good for your heart.
The consensus data now is extremely clear on this. Any theoretical cardiac benefit of alcohol is greatly offset by the increased risk of multiple types of cancer.
We don't live as single organs, right?
Exactly. We have a whole body. And that idea that 0 drinks is somehow worse than a few drinks often comes from a basic statistical flaw called the J-shaped curve.
Okay, can you just briefly explain that flaw? Who's being accidentally penalized in those stats?
Sure. So when researchers compare moderate drinkers to total abstainers, the group of total abstainers often includes people who quit drinking precisely because they were already severely damaged by it.
So people in AA or people with liver disease.
Exactly. Or people who quit due to other heavy drug use. These people are already in poor health, which skews the statistics. It makes the whole group of non-drinkers look statistically less healthy than the moderate drinkers, creating that J shape on the chart.
So the data is being corrupted by their past, not their present abstinence.
Precisely. When you strip those people out, the line flattens, and the data is just crystal clear. 0 is better than any. Having 2 drinks a week is a tiny risk, sure, but it's still not good for you. It's a risk profile, not a health benefit.
Okay, that is a fantastic clarification. Let's switch gears to cannabis, where the whole policy conversation has just been turned on its head. What's the single most important difference between, old cannabis and what we're seeing today?
The potency. The difference is staggering. In the 80s or 90s, the average THC content, that's the main intoxicating compound, was around 3 to 5%.
And today?
Today, the average legal flower product is closer to 20% THC. And concentrates can hit 80, even 90%.
And you cited sources that put this into a really startling comparison.
Yes. The difference in brain exposure between 3% THC cannabis and 20% is comparable to the potency difference between chewing a raw cocoa leaf and snorting pure, refined cocaine.
Whoa. That's a 65 times multiplier.
It's a 65x multiplier in potential effect. It is a fundamentally different, more potent, and frankly, more dangerous drug today.
And I guess the usage patterns reflect that.
They do. In states where it's legal, something like 42% of users are daily or almost daily consumers. The frequency plus that potency, it just increases the risk dramatically.
What are the biggest risks people overlook with these products, especially something like edibles?
Edibles are dangerous because of the delayed onset. The liver has to process the THC, so it can take up to 2 hours to feel the full effects.
And people get impatient.
People get impatient, they eat a piece, think it's not working after 30 minutes, they take more, and then it all hits them at once. It leads to this overwhelming overconsumption, panic, paranoia. And you also have manufacturing issues where the blending is uneven. You might get a huge dose in one bite by accident.
And the risk of psychosis, which was debated for a long time, seems a lot more plausible now.
It does, especially for vulnerable people. I would strongly, strongly advise anyone with a first-degree relative, a parent, a sibling with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, to avoid cannabis entirely. The evidence suggests that high potency can act as a stressor or a trigger.
And for everyone else.
More broadly, we just need to frame cannabis as what it is, a performance-degrading drug. Heavy use undermines short-term memory, concentration, and motivation. All things you need to navigate a demanding adult life.
Okay, that gives us a really clear framework for the risks. Let's pivot now to the upside. Strategies for recovery. If somebody recognizes this pattern in their own life and seeks help, where does a clinician even begin?
You start with optimism. I mean, millions of Americans are in recovery. And then you address their deep-seated ambivalence. It might sound counterintuitive, but the first thing a good clinician does is not demand they quit.
Right. Instead, you ask.
The core question is, why would you want to quit?
Because you can't force the motivation. If it's not theirs, it's not going to stick.
Exactly. The goal is to help the person articulate and build up their own immediate, tangible motivations. Addiction lives in a world of immediacy. I'll be healthier in 10 years means nothing.
So you need immediate carrots.
Immediate, tangible carrots.
Yep.
Money saved in the bank. Feeling physically better today. Repairing a strained relationship with a child.
Right.
Regaining social status. Those things help them navigate that tough initial period of withdrawal.
That focus on immediate rewards is critical. And speaking of immediate support, the sources were incredibly high on the effectiveness of 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous.
The 12-step fellowships are so effective and accessible because they offer that immediate support right at the moment of change. If someone wakes up on a Saturday morning determined to quit, they can find a meeting instantly.
The healthcare system can't compete with that.
No, with all its appointments and bureaucracy, it just can't compete with that immediacy.
And the evidence really supports this. That rigorous Cochrane review showed that for alcohol use disorder, AA results in abstinence rates that are routinely 50% higher than things like CBT or MET-T.
The results are truly amazing for a program that is entirely free and available on, almost every street corner.
So why then does the medical system still so often prioritize drugs or expensive time-limited therapy over these free, proven programs?
That's the tension in our system. The 12-step programs require the individual to take action, to engage in long-term community work. Clinical systems are focused on billing, on discrete treatments, so they tend to favor drugs or brief therapy. It's a structural misalignment.
What about the spiritual component of AA? That worries some people.
It does, but it's not necessary to be religious.
Mm-hmm.
The higher power can be the group itself. It can be nature. It can be the doorknob. The only requirement is acknowledging that you are not fully in control. It's about breaking the ego, the hubris that says, I can handle this myself.
Let's talk about the addict brain itself, because this explains why just using willpower so often fails. This is about deeply maladaptive learning, right? Real brain changes.
It is, and this is where the neuroscience gets really interesting. There was a groundbreaking study with people addicted to methamphetamine. It showed that activation in the nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward center in response to drug cues.
Mm-hmm.
It predicted relapse better than the person's own conscious self-report of craving.
That is a terrifying idea, that your brain knows you're going to relapse even when you don't think you will.
It just drives home that this is a medical condition, not a moral failure. It's like the substance has built this neural shortcut, a high-voltage fire alarm that screams, reward, before the conscious thinking part of your brain can even process the consequences.
The involuntary addict brain was the better predictor.
It was the superior predictor. It shows the limits of conscious self-control when you're faced with powerful environmental cues.
Which highlights the desperate need for tools that can help quiet that fire alarm. Let's talk about the new science, starting with GLP-1 agonists.
GLP-1 agonists like semaglutide, sold as Wegovy for weight loss, are extremely promising here. They were developed for diabetes and obesity, but patients on them frequently report this desired state of not wanting to want.
Not wanting to want food or shopping.
Or gambling or alcohol. It seems to carry over directly to substances.
And the sources really highlighted alcohol.
They did. Alcohol use is arguably the most eating-like drug behavior. It's social, it's ritualized, it's consumed orally, and studies show these drugs dampen that central nervous system reward circuit, leading to a significant drop in alcohol consumption.
And given the link between drinking and being overweight,
it could be a fantastic two-for benefit. People with drinking problems are 70% more likely to be overweight. This could help millions of people on two fronts.
that's a huge potential breakthrough. And what about brain stimulation?
We're seeing progress there too. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, or RTMS, it uses magnetic coils outside the head to target specific neural circuits involved in craving and impulsivity.
So a non-invasive way to retrain the brain.
Exactly, to help retrain that maladaptive reward learning. And protocols are being developed right now for cannabis and alcohol use disorder.
And psychedelics, we hear so much hype. What does the hard science say about their role in recovery?
Well, there is justified excitement, but it has to be tempered with rigor. Psychedelics like psilocybin and LSD have very low abuse potential, which is a huge advantage. Right. They are being seriously studied for depression and addiction. Agents like ibogaine are showing early promise in small, controlled studies, for instance, with veterans who have opioid use disorder. The key thing is the focus now is on rigorous trials to establish clear efficacy and safety.
So what does this all mean for the listener?
Right.
We've covered this toxic addiction for profit system, the personalized risk factors from genetics and exposure, and this dual nature of recovery internal motivation plus external support and new science.
If we connect all this to the bigger picture, what you find is a central human struggle. So many heavy substance users are seeking oblivion. They're trying to escape unpleasant truths.
Escaping suffering.
Escaping suffering, whether it's PTSD, a bad marriage, economic anxiety, or just the inherent difficulties of being alive. The substance is a way to step outside of that pain.
And that leads us to a really powerful final thought. If addiction is, at its root, an attempt to flee life's inherent suffering, then is true recovery the acquisition of new, meaningful reasons for living, like a fulfilling job, a healthy family, new behaviors. Is that the necessary confrontation of that pain?
I think so. It's about recognizing that when the substance use stops, the old, painful realities you were trying to escape, they're still there. And recovery is the difficult but profoundly rewarding process of acquiring the tools to finally confront that reality and to build a life that's so deeply meaningful and rewarding that you no longer feel the need to flee it.
A profound and necessary thought to end on. We encourage you to use this knowledge to assess your own risk factors and to better understand and support those in your life seeking that difficult but necessary change. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
Until next time.